Okay, this is when it usually says recording in progress.
Recording is in
Not
progress.
the recording is in progress.
Yeah, it does. We started early.
Okay, sure, right.
All right. Good evening. I will call the Social Services Committee to order. Can you call the roll, Jessica, please?
Harold Fry.
Here.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kathy Hughes.
Here.
Amanda Nicola.
Here.
Mercedes Fernandez.
Here.
And Renee Phillips.
Here.
Wonderful. We have a quorum. And so we will begin, and our first item on our agenda is welcoming of our new member.
Yay.
Yay, welcome, Mercedes. Right. Orientation?
I apologize. We're going to change the agenda items so that we have all of our votes in front of the meeting, and then I'll do orientation toward the end. That way,
Perfect.
if anyone needs to.
We have to get online as well?
Yeah.
Great. But not committee members, correct?
No.
Perfect. All right, we will have 2 public comment sessions during today's meeting. We will start with one now. Is there anybody online that would like to provide public comment? So raise your hand. Or, virtually.
Indicate. Possibly not,
Yes, Jennifer, you're being recognized.
Oh, I'm not sure this is the time where I'm supposed to talk with.
I'm so sorry.
She's
Oh.
not sure that's when she's supposed to talk.
If you would like to, yes, feel free.
Is this the time where I'm talking on the? Sorry, is this the time where I'm supposed to talk about?
No,
This is for
Jennifer,
public comment.
it's okay. No, this is just public comment.
Oh, okay. Right, good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and did we receive any written comments?
No.
All right.
Do we mute right now? Do I just mute her, or what do we do? Remove permission to talk.
All right. The next item I have on the agenda is the approval of the June, and I have to do them as separate votes, is that correct? The June minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the June minutes?
Motion.
Motions, I need a second.
A second.
All right. Jessica, can you call the roll?
Yes. Cheryl Fry.
Yes.
Kathy Hayes.
Yes.
Amanda Nicola.
Aye.
Mercedes Fernandez.
Right.
Thank you. And Renee Phillips. Perfect.
All right. I need another motion for the May 9th minutes. Kathy motions, Amanda is seconding. Jessica, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Cheryl Fry.
Yes.
Vice Chair Nicola.
Yes.
Thank you. Kathy Hayes.
Yes.
Mercedes Fernandez.
Yes.
Renee Phillips.
All right. May minutes have been adopted. We'll move to our next item of business, which is the mental health provider program.
So I do have, I do have slides to go through that outline the mental health provider program outcomes. We also have agency representatives from, Metropolitan Family Services, Skylight, and Impact Behavioral Health, who are prepared to speak.
Would you like me to take care of the, you
Okay, sure, there we go. So the first slide, and all of this, I can go through it very quickly because all of it's represented in the packet. It's just sort of a visual representation of where referrals are coming from to different agencies. I think the standout here is that Connections for the Homeless primarily refers to Metropolitan Family Services. Family Focus has been referring heavily to Skylight and City of Evanston staff, and Moran Center, top and bottom. It's sort of a mix of referrals. But I just wanted to remind the committee, as part of the program, participants select which mental health provider from the 4 they would like to work with. So our 4 mental health providers are Skylight Counseling Center, Impact Behavioral Health Partners, Metropolitan Family Services, and Jocelyn. This is, again, a visual representation of the population served. So one of the goals of the program was to serve our BIPOC residents with culturally competent counseling services, group or individual, and psychiatric services if possible. And then, again, a lot of information in the memo, but just to wrap up, staff recommendation is to provide additional funding to Skylight to see them through this program year, if that's necessary. It may not be, and that's fine. And then moving into the 2025 program year, the decision before the board is to either continue the program and renew it, or to discontinue the program. And I'd be happy to talk about that. But
And so I just wanna, I believe we spoke about just to get, when we sort of got that mid-year review of Skylight versus others, is they were just, their capacity and they were serving more individuals. And so that's sort of the shifting of funding would just allow them to continue to serve individuals at the rate they are. And so that, and it's not a growth in the program, it's just really a reallocation based off of where services are being provided. Just wanna remind myself of that. All right. Did you wanna provide anything else on the support service fund use, or do you wanna just discuss these first two, Jessica?
No, I think I would just love to discuss the first two.
Yep, okay. So I guess before us, first is the discussion for 24, if necessary, shifting additional dollars to Skylight to serve individuals. Is there discussion on that?
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know if I have more comments.
That's where I am as well. I don't have any comments. It just seems logical.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed the setup and was not able, stuff is busy for me right now, like, if you can just give me a snapshot. So, it sounds like they have exceeded our expectations,
Yes.
and they've been able to serve, they met their goal, essentially?
If services continue at the current rate, there is the potential that they might go slightly over budget. David Clow, the founder of Skylight, is on the phone and able to answer questions. I did have a conversation with him at the beginning of the month, and he mentioned that, you know, it might not be an issue, but the program was originally funded in the amount of $350,000, and we just haven't hit that. So, and that's fine. Service use is based on participant interest. Case management partners, those include Moran Center, Family Focus, Connections for the Homeless, and City of Evanston staff working with populations in Evanston, namely our youth and young adults, our human services specialists, and our victim advocates, and our ombudsman. So they are all able to make referrals to this program also. I think one of the things I wanted to highlight is that while Skylight is doing a tremendous job, some of their referrals come from City of Evanston staff, some are coming from other agencies. The majority of the group services are taking place at Gibbs Morrison.
Okay.
And Metropolitan Family Services serves primarily participants from Connections for the Homeless. And so they did add on 2 or 3 service components with the intake, assessment, and the community supports. And if there are questions around that, Jennifer Jenks is also on the call. She would be happy to address them. Yeah, so the issue before the committee is to renew the program for another year in the amount of $125,000, or to discontinue the program, in which case staff is going to talk a little bit further in the presentation about where those funds could potentially plug in, but.
Okay, so from looking at the table, the Skylight has had quite a bit more referrals than anyone else, right?
Mhm.
Correct.
And that's because of where they're located or the type of counseling they provide, or?
That's an interesting question. You know, I don't really know. It could be Skylight and, Impact both used, a unique engagement model. So rather than case managers just referring participants to the counseling centers, Skylight and Impact were able to send counselors to, like, group meetings with, like, the Family Focus, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren
Right,
program,
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
example. Skylight had a representative, Robert Lloyd, at, Gibbs Morrison, working with the kids before, to like get to know them, so that it was a warmer introduction to a more therapeutic relationship.
It says referrals connected 34 under Skylight number, and then it says number of group referrals 150.
Yep.
Right.
What does that mean?
There's two components to Skylight. They seem to be very successful in, addressing the referrals they're getting altogether. They have a variety of therapists, and they have maybe somewhat more availability from what I understand. And then on top of that, they do send staff, at Gibbs Morrison during the youth programming time to be there. And so have been able to build relationship and get referrals as they were on site. So some of the budget for those services is also covering the cost of that person being there on site at Gibbs Morrison, which is why there's a higher population of youth, that's being served, through this service.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand what all the different, so one says referrals connected 34.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
So of the 34 individual referrals, here, you know what, I'm not.
Go to the packet.
Yeah, I don't.
It's good here. You're trying to
Oh,
go
no,
on.
And hours make sense, you know, 188 hours, individual counseling hours, that's clear. 162 group counseling hours, that's clear. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what referrals connected means and then number of group referrals. And how those two things,
My read is that referrals connected was individuals, and then the group referrals was in, people referred for group therapy. So
Okay.
that was
Right.
my understanding,
Okay.
individual therapy versus group therapy. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So this chart shows the number of people roughly referred to Skylight. They're in the darker blue, which is a little bit hard to see with the light on. But you can see City of Evanston has made, you know, close to 10 referrals. Family Focus has made over 20, and the Moran Center is, you know, just over 5 or 6, all to Skylight for individual services directly.
but the number of group referrals, that, everybody that's referred hasn't necessarily received counseling, is that the way to understand that?
I think that,
I'm sorry, so if we're looking at the submitted referrals, we've got the partner referrals, and then we've got the reported. I see.
And I'm sorry, I'm looking at, let me make sure, I'm looking at this.
Yeah,
one right
looking
here.
at-
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at that too. So one of the ways and thank you for asking, I'm sorry this gets a little confusing. So I have.
It may not be confusing, but this is, my brain may work differently than this chart does, so.
No, it's okay, it is. So when, case managers make referrals, they fill out a form stack form that goes to me, so I can see and track the referrals that they're making on their end.
Okay,
And then the agencies submit quarterly reports that let me know how many individual referrals they received and from which partners. So I line those up to see who's connecting to services. And you know, I think what we can see is, you know, Skylight's partner referrals are matching up with their reported referrals, the referrals that they're identifying in the reports, the grants reports that they submit. Sometimes partners make referrals, and then those referrals don't connect to the clinician.
I guess what's throwing me off is 150 referrals, but only 162 group hours. That seems low for 150 referrals, unless I'm not understanding that right.
Okay, say that again.
So 34
please.
So 34 referrals to 188 hours makes sense to me, but 150 group referrals to 160 group counseling hours, it seems like it would be more hours, no? Unless everybody that was referred didn't receive counseling, it was a referral, but for whatever reason, they just,
Yeah, like if it's a drop-in group.
yeah, they just never connected.
They never
Yeah,
came in.
Exactly. Unless I'm not understanding these numbers right, that's what I'm trying to, and we can move on if we don't have an answer yet, but that's just what I'm trying to understand. But regardless, it seems like Skylight has been successful. There was another thing that talked about they used, 17% of the budget, then it says 57% of the budget. Is that the total budget?
Yeah.
For everybody, not just like
No,
Sky?
that was their budget.
That was their budget, okay.
Yeah, like
Okay.
Skylight has 14, for
Mhm.
their service agreement.
Okay. Okay, and then the question is whether or not what are we being asked to approve tonight? Whether or not we do what?
Continuation.
If we're renewing the program for 2025 in the amount of 125,000, and the renewal would be to continue working with Skylight and Metropolitan Family Services.
Just those two organizations?
Yeah.
Okay. Where do we get this money again from? Where did this come from?
It's from the Human Services Fund,
And I should ask the question more directly for time. Does this money like roll over? Because we haven't used all the money that we budgeted. So does this roll over, or does it kicks back to the general fund and we have to rebudget it again, or how does it?
It depends in this case. We put the rollover for this in the budget,
Okay,
because that was our recommendation to do an extra
okay,
year. So, in this case, because if the budget gets approved, that the rollover then would stay within this fund. It would not kick back to the general
Okay.
fund or disappear, if the budget gets approved.
and is it just allocating the rollover money, or are we proposing any additional funds, or just the
No.
rollover, right?
Just the rollover.
Okay.
The demand is not as high as was portrayed initially.
Okay,
So we're suggesting maybe continue with a smaller budget that matches what we're actually seeing
Yep.
with the two agencies that are actually seeing activity and referrals for another year,
yep.
and then to regroup on what we want to do moving forward potentially.
Okay. And that answers the other question. Behavioral Impact reached out to us about, using funds for a different purpose since they were able to connect, their referrals they were able to get them signed up with
Medicaid?
Medicaid.
Mhm.
And I guess that's my last question is, did Skylight or Met Family Services try to do that as well? Or,
So Skylight does not,
okay,
Met Family does.
they do not even, you're saying they don't make the attempt to try to sign people up if they're not insured?
Right.
Okay.
And part of that is because, and I'm sure David, if you have further questions, I'm sure David would be happy to address them, but Skylight is a for-profit organization, and Met Family and Impact are both nonprofit, so it's
They're not used to
either-
doing all of that,
Right,
going through all that,
right.
what can be messy probably sometimes and
Very
a lot of work.
Very.
One of the goals of the program is that we knew that there were longer wait lists for people
Yeah.
with Medicaid to receive
Yeah.
counseling services.
Yeah,
So using city funds kind of bypassed that.
right.
That was good.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to ask if we could see the slide with the, percentage of,
The population served.
population.
So we're at, 72%, of the people served identify as Black or African American.
Mm-hmm.
16% of the people served identify as white. Close to 2% refuse to respond. And then almost 10%, report as multicultural or biracial.
There's no recording of, Latino, Hispanic.
You know what? There is, and I apologize. This slide deck
Race and not ethnicity?
got condensed a little bit, but I would be happy to provide that information. I would be happy to provide that information because I do have that information.
It could be, due to the fact that many of the agencies have very little number of, Spanish-speaking staff and mental health.
That is very true. Metropolitan Family Services actually does have, and Skylight both have Spanish-speaking clinicians. Impact might as well. I can't remember. Actually, and Jocelyn does as well. The providers selected did have clinicians who spoke multiple languages. And you know what? I can get that information for you, Mr. Reeves.
Yeah, I think, I'm pretty sure we discussed that
Yes, we did.
quite a bit, yeah, so they should, I would hope they did, all of them.
Right.
Yeah, there was
Yeah,
one of the
especially Spanish.
factor we,
Yeah.
On the main one.
What group did they get, did the Latinx community get, where were they, cause that's 100% right here, so where were they, other multiracial, or?
So the chart is inaccurate. It
Oh, okay.
says that it's race and ethnicity, but it's not.
Not.
It's just race. And
That's it.
ethnicity would be a different report, and I combined it and then didn't.
No, that's all good. Is it that Skylight doesn't accept Medicaid? They accept Medicaid, they just won't
They do
find
not
somebody else,
accept
they don't accept it, okay. All right.
They do have a foundation to help
That they do.
support, like provide a scholarship, but that's, it's,
No, I remember now, that brought it all back, okay. Yeah, okay. Sounds good.
I don't think you all.
It is nice to have people sign up for Medicaid after this. I think, you know, from talking to Impact, that was,
yeah.
it seems like it's more sustainable unless we plan to continue this.
Right, yeah.
You know, so I think it makes sense, since it's rollover money, to continue it, but I think in the end of this, what we're, you know, I'm sure what we're trying to achieve is to make sure everybody is properly covered so that they can get these services. So yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But definitely support moving it forward for now.
Jessica, do we know how, the Medicaid enrollment is done? Are they doing it at the IDHS office, or are they doing it in-house? Like at their center, or are the case managers traveling with?
That is a good question, and we could ask providers, because if it's one thing this program has taught me is that everybody does a little bit differently.
Sure.
Do we squeeze Impact in there?
So,
Just because they've been doing a good job with the Medicaid thing?
So Impact actually walked away from this program because they only spent a very small amount, because actually all the referrals they got, they could cover with Medicaid, and they wanna bill us if they could bill somebody else.
Okay.
So when it comes to this specific group of funding, they didn't see the need, to continue with.
But the agencies can still refer people, do you think they'll still refer people to Impact?
The agencies could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that was
Medicaid would
existing,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is because they came back to us and said, hey, look, we didn't spend any of your money because we just signed everybody up for Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I see that as a good thing, so
Yeah.
I just hope that we continue to refer new people to them as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something we could discuss with the agency.
I was asking the point because I know from firsthand that it's a lot of, time that goes into signing up for all the different, supports that IDHS has. I think that the staff would deserve something for that, you know, it's a lot to do.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at
And
it.
the follow-up too, after that, just doesn't stop with the paperwork. stuff out there. And then it's online too, so that's why I was asking, you can go online, go there, or you can do a phone interview. How they're doing it. All of it takes time, but I was just.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because all of the providers, I believe all of the providers, if I'm remembering correctly, are able to work with, do you provide virtual appointments or telehealth?
Then when you have a case manager or anything behind the client, it just goes much faster. Like the enrollment is very fast, it's like next day.
Do you know the age of?
I have a slide that got cut, but I can provide, age and ethnicity.
Yeah.
I would like to know if they're household or individual. Is it family or individual? Or
The
both?
individual counseling, yeah, includes
I was talking
individual
about the Medicaid.
couples.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
The Medicaid enrollment. Are they doing that for
you know
the
what,
household or?
that I don't know. Would we like to ask the providers?
It's there on the line, right?
The question to the providers, if you could raise your hand so we can unmute you, is if you're assisting with Medicaid enrollment, are you assisting with the individual or the full family? If you know.
We're catching up with you.
All right, Jennifer?
Jennifer, you're on mute.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay? I'm getting some audio.
Yeah, there's a slight challenge, but we hear you.
Oh, you do? Okay. Yes, so we will assist with the client. So, if it is an adult or a child, and, we will help them with getting the Medicaid. And, if it were an adult and the children are not in our, the direct clients, we would also help with getting the children Medicaid.
Okay.
They do both.
So
Last one.
if they're helping the adult and there are children in the household, they help with the children too.
Jennifer's from where?
Impact.
Metropolitan, nope,
sorry.
Metropolitan
Oh, I'm
Family
sorry.
Services.
So does that help, when they get when they enroll the families with children, does that roll over into CCAP too? Or do they just stop at the IDHS support?
Well, so that might be benefits enrollment, yeah,
Right.
it's slightly different.
It is like a different program.
Right.
It is, but they have access to at least the application part. So it's coming from IDHS anyway. But yes, you're right. Both separate. So that's if you're servicing a household with a two-year-old or a 3-year-old, or, a household that needs before school and after school care, houses.
That might be a good question for when we ask our case managers, sort of their process.
Yeah.
That would really fit in.
Breakfast that we've already discussed, and that piece too, that would tie into all of that.
All right.
That's there, and that's a good point, because the case management providers and case management services would be that benefits enrollment.
Those two breakfasts, and then you got, baby, right, and then you got right down the street. That's 3 different sports that we're involved with. Breakfast.
All right, so before the committee, it's 2 separate items. First is, if Skylight needs additional dollars this year, are we supportive of reallocation within the existing budget?
Yeah, that actually could just be an administrative thing.
Oh,
letting
okay,
you guys
so it's
know.
just awareness, we don't need to
Doesn't
vote on it.
Yeah.
Great. An awareness that may occur so they can continue to serve, which I think everybody's nodding makes sense. We want people served. So then before the board today, or the committee today, is do we continue this program for 2025 at a budget of $125,000 with Skylight and Metropolitan Family Services. Do I have
Do we have any? So moved.
I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Just a little bit of discussion here, will that get them through the year, you think, or?
Yeah, it's an up to amount, it actually is rounded up a little bit, so it should get them through the year.
Through the year, okay. Certainly to a question, is it Mercedes? Would love to know how we do have a large Spanish-speaking population in Evanston, and so we should be able to get those numbers up, especially if we're being intentional about going to places and offering the service, which I love. I think I heard you say that Skylight and maybe even Met were, joining groups and maybe at the end, I would imagine introducing themselves and offering their services. So we have, Evanston Latinos and quite a few groups that are always doing events, and they can participate in those and offer the service. I would say that, and then wanting to understand the age of the people served. I don't know if there's any other data.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Bush, you know what, can you go into Drive? So one of the agencies that refer, or the partners that refer to the providers are our case management providers.
Oh, right.
So that's Connections for the Homeless, Infant Welfare Society, Moran Center,
Right.
Family Focus. Yeah, and Impact is a case management provider as well.
I guess they could Evanston Latinos could partner to get people enrolled in those case management programs.
Yes,
There's still some coordination that could happen.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Which slideshow?
If they're eligible,
Please feel free to discuss
Talk
further.
more.
We're just waiting.
We're checking you out, right?
I wanted to share, because I work for EDHS,
Okay.
that, the population in Evanston, the Latino population in Evanston, I don't have the exact numbers, but for EDHS, we are the 21.3% of Latinos.
We know.
Growing.
Then 12 years ago, it used to be 50,
Yeah.
I started working. And, I see the difficulties for social workers to get, services in Spanish for mental health for their students, parents. And, it's been ongoing for many years. So, to share that,
Yeah.
because we need to think about that.
Yeah, are we sure, because again, I know we had a robust conversation about the languages that were offered at each, at all of them. Can we confirm just real quick, does Met and Skylight, do they have that?
Yeah.
They offer Spanish as a,
Yes, they do.
that's what I was, okay.
David, I don't know if you can either just put in the chat or, ask to speak, but what languages do your, professionals, mental health professionals speak?
Go ahead, David.
Go ahead,
You can
David.
hear me? Yeah, English and Spanish. We have English and Spanish
That's Met,
providers.
That's, Skylight, this is
Okay.
Skylight.
it is Met on the line, is it? Metropolitan.
Thank you, David.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
David. No? Just warming up?
We're coming.
Okay. Jennifer, can you hear us?
Jennifer, Metropolitan.
Yes, so we took a team approach, and right now we have, that are gonna be in English, Spanish, and French. We also have, translation service that the agency uses, so if somebody is speaking another language and, it's gonna be hard to find a provider, Metropolitan will be one of those providers that will use translation services. But we have staff fluent in Spanish and French right now. We also have, staff, we are very diverse in our staff. So we have, African American recovery support specialists. We We have a Hispanic case manager, who is a case manager and a therapist. And we have, 2 white therapists. We have male and female, and, so we have, nice diversity.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Is it the same that's making this, giving
I
it to you?
think it's.
Or is it the,
Because
Might be her.
David
Right.
was coming through properly, so I think
oh, it was,
it's
okay, I don't think I
one.
heard it. Well, yeah, we just have to figure out how to, I think we should reach out to Evans and Latinos in particular, and if you know anybody else that could help us figure out how to get more people referred to our partner agencies who are offering case management, and then through that, they can be referred to this, individual and group counseling if needed.
I also wanted to share that, at ATHS, we have, interpretation and translation services. I'm the interpreter and translator, and because one person cannot, provide services for all in IEPs or 504 plans, we have, an agency where we can get interpreters for conferences, open house, or individual encounters with, ATHS staff. But we also have a telephonic interpretation service, which is very helpful. They have like over 100 languages, and you just call and can get immediate assistance in any language.
And is that only for the students, or is that accessible to the community at large?
It's for students and parents
Okay,
in any language.
so they must be enrolled into the school system.
Yes, it's
Okay.
for, ETHS parents and students, especially now that we got a lot of, immigration, group of, families in our school,
Families, yeah.
and they do not speak English at all, or from Haiti.
Right, right.
The first, 5 languages we provide service, English, Haitian Creole, Arabic, Chinese, Mandarin, and I don't know if it's Farsi or Lingala or any African languages like Lingala or Kinyarwanda. But we need to provide those services, so that's why we got the telephonic interpretation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. We can call the roll.
Chair Osborne,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nicole,
Yes.
Kathy Hayes,
Yes?
Mercedes Fernandez, Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
thank you, and Renee Phillips.
All right. Thank you all. The next item we have is our community needs assessment survey.
No, I'm sorry, we were going to move all of the voted agenda items.
Got it.
So
So the next item I have is nomination of chair and vice chair. All right. May I make a motion, a nomination? All right, well, I would love to nominate Kathy Hayes to serve as our next chair for the Social Services Committee. Kathy has been a strong committee member, attention to detail, compassionate, she's committed, and she will, in my estimation, serve us well as our next chair. So it's a great honor to nominate Kathy to replace me.
Second. You'd be fantastic.
I third that.
I don't think there's a third in the system. Thank you.
Well, with that, we can take a vote. Chair Osborne,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nicole,
I,
Do I?
Kathy Hayes, yes?
Yes, yes, you vote on yourself.
You accept?
Hold on, we gotta vote first.
I vote first? Okay, yes.
For yourself. Yeah, Mercedes Fernandez,
Yes.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
and Renee Phillips.
Okay,
Congratulations.
thank you very much. I've had a great leader. If I can keep up with these two leaders here.
We wanna thank Samantha for
Absolutely.
hard work as a
So
chair.
long, oh my God.
Kept us on track
Very
Yeah.
appreciated.
so many times.
Gave it a go. Now, is Kathy chair, or am I still chairing until?
You're still chairing,
Okay, I
don't
didn't-
try that.
I was just like,
Don't try that with me, Samantha. Come on.
Vice chair, have another nomination? Or,
Am I being renominated?
I thought it said vice,
Yes.
yes.
It's true.
Oh, okay, you would be happy to do it.
All right. I nominate Amanda Nicola, who's been a wonderful vice chair and will
Amen.
continue to be so. Do I have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Chair Olfry. Vice Chair Nagola. Kathy Hayes,
yes.
Mercedes Fernandez, Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
and Renee Phillips. Great, thank you.
All right. Now, we have the community needs.
Yes. Portions of this presentation were, given to the Housing and Community Development Committee. And forgive me while I speak and work to share my screen. So, but we do have additional information to provide that is specific to I'm sorry, give me just 1 minute. We have a- Right. Oh, Mary. Goodness. Okay. Nope. Okay, so we're talking about the new consolidated plan. It's a little bit, overshadowed by, Envision Evanston, as well it should be, because that is our exciting, new, bold-facing, plan. The consolidated plan is an assessment of our community. It is a federal requirement in order to receive our CDBG and home grants. And it is, not only is it an assessment of our community, but it talks about the anticipated resources and where we're moving for the next several years.
On the admin, it's a very structured plan, with
Yeah.
very specific questions.
Yeah. It is. So the first part of not the first part, but one important thing to note is that under this consolidated plan, we get a new low, moderate map of our city. This is important because, while we fund public services, and that's based on the income eligibility of participants using the services, our public facilities are based on location. So the portions in yellow are our low, moderate income, block groups, and that is where our public facilities projects that can be funded with CDBG win. This has changed slightly. We lost, parts of our fifth ward along the river, but we gained, this block here in our second ward. There's also been some shift in our eighth ward. While we lost some territory, we also gained more than we lost. This information is based on American Community Census data, which is challenging. It's underreported and
And did we lose those for like gentrification or something? Or what?
so it's based on who responds to the survey
Oh,
at the
okay.
time. We use the survey, there's a short form that's done every year to select zip codes, and people who select zip codes, and then there's a long form. The data we're using is the 2016 to 2020 data, which is it's a little bit outdated. And when we look at like our pro-housing initiative and our Envision Evanston initiative, they're using the most current data.
Okay.
our data is defined by HUD. HUD says, like, this is the marker in the sand, this is what we're using, and sort of any project in areas that we think are more low mod than they would appear on this map, we would have to do surveys in order to qualify those areas. So,
No, one of the section that we lost, quote unquote, in the fifth ward, has a very small number, and I believe historically it's kind of shifted back and forth.
Okay.
We know kind of generally where it stands, but on this exercise, it tends to be included, not be included, depending.
Okay, yeah, that makes
Yeah, there's a margin of error that is quite large on some of those small blocks.
Okay. So you're saying that the fifth ward now separated from off the lake, is
Right.
that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?
these sections off of the lake did not qualify as low and moderate income. So if, for example, we were using a portion of CDBG funds to invest in a park, under this new map, that project might not be as possible, but
Right.
it qualified under our previous on-plan map, which I would be happy to send, but I brought for reference so I could speak intelligently about it, included, yes, I'm happy to pass it out. Yeah.
Now, this map is not,
Yeah.
in a lot of the activities,
Thank God.
in a lot of the activities that we do anyway, they're population specific and income qualifying. So in a lot of what we do, the map isn't necessarily, like, it helps us understand where the population is, but it's not necessarily what determines eligibility. So that's the good news is even if this section there on the map doesn't show as income, like as majority low mod, it doesn't mean that we won't be doing services there because there's a lot of things we can do that doesn't use the map. We use other data to show that the population is eligible.
Is
But,
this map on the website yet, the city's website, or not yet?
Not yet, because we're working on another set, which is the CDBG target area map. So when both of those are complete, then we'll update both of those.
But those steps will be in the con plan and our point of
Yeah.
reference, a good, interesting reason.
They'll be on the website when we post it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for our con plan, we look at information from a number of different sources. We're not just relying on our American Community Survey data. We've talked about the Public Best. We also look at reports from within the city and from our community partners. You know, in the last con plan, we didn't have as many reports to go on. But this year, we have so many. And so these next couple of slides just outline, the Social Services Committee heard about the E-Plan, when it was released in 2022, I want to say. We're also looking at our CART plan, the surveys that were put out by the Equity Empowerment Committee, around reparations, just to name a few. We're also using information from Preserve 2040, Pro Housing. We've been working closely with Envision Evanston to understand what they're hearing from the community. We also have, the Parks and Rec put out a survey, so we've got their information. Just a lot of plans. Our stakeholder plans include the Joining Forces, Equitable Zoning Project that came out. We've been working with the Kofi branch of Evanston Parents, known as PEACE. We look at the reports that are put out by District 65 and 202, primarily to understand the shifting needs of our homeless students and students with IEPs. And then both of our hospitals put out community needs assessments, so those are included. Then we go a little bit more broad, and the HAC, puts out their plan, and that is broader, actually. Also Cook County, and our Alliance to End Homelessness in Suburban Cook County, our continuum of care to understand homeless needs assessment. But again, those aren't Evanston specific, they're a little bit broader. Oh, I'm sorry. We also put out our community needs assessment survey. It was smaller this year than it was for the previous plan, and we really used a targeted audience. So our community needs assessment went out to the agencies that the city funds, including our agency partners, and we worked with Evanston, the Cradle to Career Advocates for Action, and they used paper surveys in the community that were fabulous. So even though we got a small number of responses, we believe that the responses we received really target the populations we're looking to serve. So primarily Second, Fifth, and Eighth Ward members. You can see we got a lot of responses from our Spanish-speaking community. Great. Our survey had 4 primary sections. We were looking at the housing programs that the city is already sort of funding or hopes to fund, our public facilities, public services, and economic development. We got very low responses in economic development, which is fine because we've got Thrive and putting assets to work to understand the needs of our business community. We really looked at public services and housing programs. We also looked at public facilities. HCDC talked about that. I can mention it a little bit. And this is just sort of an overview of who responded. We were happy to hear from a majority of our renters, and we were happy that the majority of our respondents did fall into income brackets that would be best supported to achieve. So around our housing, we did hear that the housing programs that we were looking at are fitting people's needs, and there's definitely a need for those housing programs. Sorry, let me just catch up with myself here. The biggest challenge is that families are cost burdened, and the households are either cost burdened or severe cost burdened, which is why 58% of respondents didn't think that housing matched their needs in Evanston. The fewest concerns were around housing conditions, which is good. So like pests, being able to keep rooms warm enough or cool enough, or mold or lead. So that is good. And I can't stress it enough, our comp plan goals are driven by the responses that we get. We also told the community around internet use. Okay, so this is a visual representation of what we saw, and it's a little hard to read.
Right.
It lists all of the housing programs that were represented in the survey, and in this case, the programs with the least amount of interest are actually the ones that we're looking at, because the green represents people who think that these programs aren't important or not critically important. So the reverse of that is,
They are
more
important,
people
yeah.
think, yes, rental assistance is important because it's ranked low in those areas.
Yeah, and the reason we did that is because essentially when we looked at the data, we look at housing programs, they all thought they were important. And we had to look at the opposite and understand which programs were deemed as slightly less important.
Gotcha.
So like a homelessness shelter and services, a lot of people did not rank that as important or critically important, and we believe that is because there have been a lot of resources for those services recently, which isn't to say that they aren't important, it's just that there wasn't as much
or something, or
demand for needs.
Definitely, right. The second part that's, less critical is anything related to homeownership, which makes sense in the population we're working with, that tends to be more renters.
renters and homeowners.
and don't feel necessarily like they're at the point where they can ownership.
And I know we were referencing a lot of other surveys that were done, like, and other processes, but for this survey, it didn't get that much participation, right, from what I remember seeing, or it did?
It did not,
Okay,
comparatively. I mean, under, less than 300
okay.
total surveys filled out, paper and online.
Well, that's not bad.
Right.
I thought it was lower than that.
And I think what was really good to see is and that was kind of what we set out to do. We wanted to hear from the people that are benefiting, so all that data is from people that are income eligible.
Yeah,
Out of the survey, we were super happy to see that people were willing to share that information.
yeah.
It was optional. The vast majority filled it in, so we were able to just really focus on who would receive the service and what are they looking for.
So it was about 100 and some people that filled it out?
175.
That's good, that's a good job. I thought it was a lot less than that, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So in our last one, we got like over 800, so I'm feeling a little, we did better in terms of
Well, I only
response.
asked because I
Very
think people are surveyed out, we've done a lot of surveys.
Yeah. And that's why we did that, because we
Yeah.
just didn't feel like we could go out in the community and ask
Yeah.
yet again, do you have any issues with housing?
Yeah.
Right,
We know.
right. Well, and as we look at different sections of the comp plan, like when Parks and Rec did their green space survey, we used that information.
Exactly,
It was recent
yeah.
enough to inform of what we'll be doing. So the exciting part for this committee is, the public service usage. We know that, or we heard from the survey that benefits enrollment is important, as is the need for food for people in our community, and youth services. So these were the services that participants or respondents said that they used and, like, appreciated. The services that people need but could not access, and we don't know if that's because they weren't available or they had enrollment issues or connection issues. Those services include financial literacy programs, and credit repair, again, provision of food, and legal services. So a visual representation looks like this. This is the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah. So in this chart, the green is, I need this service but don't know how to get it. So anything that's high in green, we would try to maybe think about putting more resources toward provision of those services. And then the blue is, I use this service. So we don't necessarily want to see, those services reduced because people need them.
You want blue and green together.
Yep. And so it really is food, benefits enrollment, and youth services are the big.
So do you have an understanding of what they, outside of debt relief, what they were focusing on financial literacy?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question and something that our workforce development team is looking at. I brought my readers, guys, just so I can, so I have
Look
notes.
out, the readers.
Yeah, so we were really looking at like one-on-one, financial counseling services, credit repair. We know that there's a lot of, income and credit inequity in our community, and we will have some maps with the con plan that speak to that.
Did they happen to say it was because of lack of employment or just lack of?
No, we didn't, yeah.
Thought
I
I'd
don't have that.
ask, so, because it was, I was wondering if it was just for underemployment or no employment or, just lack of education throughout the school system and everything else.
I've heard anecdotally
All
that
of the
credit
above.
scores are really hard for people, right? Like that drives, if you have a low credit score and you don't even know why or how to boost it up, it affects your ability to get loans for cars or
An apartment.
apartment.
And lots of
Very hard to
predatory
understand.
and
Right, that's-
correcting it, you know,
that's-
that are predatory.
Even if you have a good score, these scores, it's very hard to understand.
Right, it's so fluid sometimes, one day it's up, one day it's down, and there's so many predatory businesses, period, that will give you a negative score. So payday loans and things like that. That's why I was wondering if they gave any insight as to why, though I believe we definitely need it, so people can be more independent, why
What it is, so we can know
yeah.
what to provide.
provide, that's an honest, earnest service versus somebody on a corner alley in basement in the dark trying to fix your credit rating, you know?
Well, and you know, to that point, legal services, kind of right there in the middle. And legal services is, again, a little bit tricky because we don't know if people need help with evictions or estate planning or
Expungement.
employment. Right, so there's a huge, but the need lets us know that maybe that's an area, not this year, and maybe not next year, but like where staff could work together across departments and with our community partners to suss things out a little bit more.
Yeah.
I would be interested in that for the financial literacy piece too.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Because some of that could potentially be like a lighter lift if it is like if it's education versus like,
Right.
so like understanding would be helpful.
And there's been some, my understanding is there's been some partnerships with other departments, with local, banking institutions. And, that's definitely something we could, if, some of it could be also marketing existing programs.
Yeah.
Because April is literacy, financial literacy month, and I know some of the bigger banks do, help or endorse financial literacy, and I know some African-American organizations also work on providing information about literacy and how to work your way to adulthood. I myself just dragged my grandchildren to the bank, and it's a struggle for them to understand that it makes a difference, and it's a behavioral, system that you need to understand and participate in. Or for us grown folks sometimes. Interesting.
Okay, so with all of that community information, we're now looking at the specific sections of the con plan. It's a close to 200-page or over 200-page document by the time all is said and done, so it helps to sort of have a roadmap. We do have sort of an overview that talks about what we did in our last con plan and where we're going. Our citizen participation plan, so how we're outreaching and engaging the community, that is up for public review also. And who our partners are, who we're talking to. One of the biggest sections is our needs assessment. So this is where we're looking at the populations we're serving, what our housing looks like, who our institutional partners are and the services that they offer, whether it's like the HAC or Albany Cares, Greenwood Cares. We've got, let's see, and our non-homelessness special needs assessment. Then we have our market analysis. So this looks at not the populations who need housing, but our housing stock and availability, our public facilities, and then our business, our workforce development, our workforce, their strengths, and who our the major employers are in Evanston and what their business needs are. There's also a section around broadband and how we're addressing climate hazard mitigation.
Who are them? Is it like hospitals and schools? Are those the main employers in Evanston? The biggest?
I do feel like I should remember this off the top of my head. It will be posted next It will be
Okay.
posted.
I will wait.
Healthcare was a big one.
Okay.
Healthcare was a big one, and it's interesting because our workforce development division does have two programs, that connect, younger job seekers who might be interested in healthcare with employers in the community, like Mather or, who is it, just on Foster, under the trains there, the rehab facility?
You talking about Prem Towers?
No, not
No.
in Towers.
On Emerson.
In any event, our senior living communities, because there are a number in Evanston,
That's
and there,
what
what
you're
is
talking about?
it?
It's on
Up
North.
here?
No, in the
No,
rehab.
Up here?
Like a physical rehab.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Henderson
okay.
facility
Physical, yes,
Oh, we have one of those?
yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot.
We have a couple. So, in any event,
Just curious.
healthcare is a big
I
one,
think right now the name.
retail, and
Oh, I
professional
thought they were.
services.
What type of rehab are we talking about? This one?
Physical.
Oh, physical, okay,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
surgery or-
Yeah, we got a lot of those.
Wrong direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, the next section in our comp plan is the strategic plan, which talks about, like, so we know we have these challenges. What resources, what programs are we putting toward them? And this is repeated in our action plan, which is our 1-year, plan to move the needle on affordable housing, homeless services, economic development. I mean, we're not, economic development's important, it's just handled by a different, Paul and his group with, Thrive and putting assets to work are doing good things. So these are just the sections to look out for, and then how we monitor ourselves, not only our partners, but how we monitor the work that we're doing. Okay, so from that, we have some projections. I might turn this over to Marion, because this is her section, but this is an outline of, not yet though, filling when I mess up. As this committee knows, we lost ESG funding for 2024, and we aren't anticipating those funds. So ESG was, shelter, services, street outreach, homelessness prevention, and rapid rehousing. We're looking at ways to fill in those gaps. The majority of our funds come from CDBG, although we are anticipating a decrease. So know that we're anticipating a lower CDBG award. We're also anticipating a lower home award. And home primarily funds our TBRA, our tenant-based rental assistance program, so that's the housing and case management for families in Evanston. And home funds can also, our funds can also be used for shelter and housing.
So I'm gonna qualify that, a tiny bit. It's not all doom and gloom, because those are assumptions. And essentially this year, with where Congress was with the budget and with the election, we had very little to go on outside of just the, residential budget for HUD. So that's what we went by. There can be vast differences in disagreement when it comes to the budget. But we have to make our plan now, and we have to be realistic based on what we know right now. We could get potentially different numbers, but we can't plan on it. It's not looking like we will. So we're making the plan with the best of the information we have. We expect this is generally where things are trending. It's not necessarily that the HUD budget's being reduced. It just looks like they're shifting dollars between program, and that, CDBG tends to be looking down, and housing vouchers might be looking up a little bit based on where the demand is. So at least that's the one reassuring thing, is that not necessarily a total budget cut, just shifts between programs.
Go ahead.
Why did we lose our ESG?
It's based on entitlement, so they have a formula of household in need, and we were just under the threshold. And Will County was just over the threshold, so.
Yeah, so they look at all the numbers, they split the budget was at a certain number, and the threshold to receive direct entitlement was 150, and our numbers came to like 149.3. So those dollars just went back to the state. So it's possible that sometimes, because Oak Park was in the same situation, 1 or 2 comp plans ago, it's very possible that sometime during this comp plan, we'll have 1 year where they'll pop up again, and we'll have to amend everything and find ways to make it work, which we will, and be very excited about it, because it's extra money. But we can't plan on it because we expect that in the long run, it's just gonna continue like that. We'll just have to adapt if we do get it 1 year.
Essentially, we are not quite in need enough by this formula.
Yeah, or they're not allocating enough funding.
Yeah, yeah.
We're in need.
Yes,
because it's-
by this
we
formula.
didn't make the cut.
Right, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also worked with Connections for the Homeless and the YWCA, who were, the partners that received ESG historically. So Connections did receive a state award of ESG for shelter and street outreach. We anticipate a gap in services for prevention, so that was like rent assistance to keep people in housing. One of the things that we've been seeing over the past year is that rapid rehousing is difficult to spend in Evanston because moving households from shelter to housing can be very expensive, and households struggle to reach self-sufficiency. So Connections was shifting those dollars internally in order to spend them. We're looking at,
But the Y did not receive.
the Y did not.
how much was that they were getting before?
$15,000.
1.5?
Yes.
Okay.
They also received 35 in CDBG funds.
Yeah.
Well, 15 in city funds, 15 in
Okay.
CDBG.
I always get this mixed up. Is this funding goes towards the case management, safety net, plus all the other stuff we do with ACDC, like the park that we're doing and historically?
Okay, yeah, so when we talk CDBG, because home is like, the majority of what we're talking about right now is discussed and allocated by HTDC.
Okay.
Outside of ESG used to be, and then,
ESG used to be social services?
Mhm.
Okay.
And then the public services part of CDBG, which is only 15% of that. So the vast majority of it, you're correct, is handled by HTDC, but it does have relevance here just
Yeah.
because this is a comp plan that is driving kind of
Yeah.
So what's the main source of funding then for social services work?
the mental health fund, which is a
That's,
specific
okay,
fund.
cool. Yeah, I always
So
get that
that,
mixed
yeah.
up. Okay.
So we're really talking about a small part of those funds that contribute to the conversation
Okay.
here, but since we're making the plan, we wanna make
Yeah,
sure
no, it
you're
makes
aware of
sense.
where we're going.
It's clear, cool.
It
We are
impacts.
planning cuts,
Side.
so, yeah.
And we don't expect any cuts on the human services side.
Depending on what budget gets voted, we
Right.
ask to keep it, flat plus the rollover, but it
Yeah.
depends what conversation happens at city council.
Okay.
But we would like to not have.
Yeah.
If we can just put a pitch in, we would like no
Right,
cut.
if you were.
If you happen to know a couple of people.
Yeah, okay. So,
So they get that for the general fund, that's not like, that's not a federal pass-through thing?
The
So
mental
what-
health fund?
Yeah,
the Human Services Fund, I think a portion of it is from a tax levy.
Mhm.
It's a
So-
specific bucket.
Yeah,
okay,
so we want our portion of that tax levy.
yeah.
And then
So when you see
No cut.
grant programs,
Please.
community grant programs in the budget,
Yeah,
this is what comes here.
okay. And we did increase it a little bit during one cycle, I know, maybe not this year.
Couple years
Maybe
ago,
last
it
year.
went from, roughly
Oh,
780 or something
Because
that.
we wanted to
million.
provide more grants to more
Mhm.
people, we had like, that was a
We
year
had-
when we had more
we had to-
requests than
Yeah.
funding.
Yep.
But it stayed at that level since then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and we are recommending that we keep it there. Or, we will have to.
Come back and make.
Given where we're going with grant funding, it would
Yeah.
be really great if it kept going.
Yeah, for sure, okay.
Or we'll, we have
Never
to.
should have going here.
So our other tentative projection is that the CDBG that we are allowed to use for public services, we would move that more toward housing-related services.
How much is that about?
That's $200,000. So
Okay.
for context, CDBG is split between different goals. So we're trying to focus a lot of it in keeping housing activities either flat or increasing them based on what we've heard.
Mhm.
We're reducing where we could, which is, the majority of the cut is around the infrastructure and public facilities. And cutting as well some of the budget for code enforcement, because we have other ways to be able to keep that budget through general funds for inspections, through new, find ways essentially to keep the money where we can. And then, as far as CDBG public services, we are capped at 15%. So we're still recommending to keep that. But what we'd like to suggest is using public services for housing services. And we're keeping it fairly broad for now, but part of that allows us to possibly consider an emergency rental assistance program in the future under this. This is the only goal where we're allowed to use, to do essentially rental assistance with CDBG. Very, very restrictive in other ways. So that gives us a potential to have that or other services that are specifically kind of related to housing, which kind of matches with what we've
About
heard from
future,
our
you
community.
mean 2025, hopefully, or?
It probably wouldn't be before 2026.
Okay.
And that's why, I think on the slide before, I was saying 25 might be kind of a transition year. Because putting together a new program there's no way we would be able to start it just yet. But we want to lay the groundwork to have that ability if this is where we need to go. And if it's not where we need to go, there's still a lot of other things we could do under public services, that is housing services, that matches with where we've heard the demand is. But yeah, essentially,
But is the recommendation to keep public services with HCDC for 2025?
Social Services Committee would still review,
I do not have an answer on that just yet.
Okay.
So right now, we're doing the con plan and trying to get a feel and a vote on the con plan. If organizationally, if it's really truly housing services or rental assistance, it might make sense for it to be discussed at the same committee that also discussed home TIGRA as an example, things like that. But I think we're not quite ready to make any changes just yet. I would like to see kind of how the draft comp plan goes, what gets approved, and where we're at before.
And I only say that because there's some emergency assistance activity, I won't say a program, because I agree that'll take some time, but there's certainly some activity that I personally would like to see in 2025, and I'm likely going to be making some recommendations to that effect in our budget, so it'd be nice if we had some funding for it, you know. So that's more of a ACDC conversation, but.
Right, I think,
just
yeah,
wanted to-
and I will caution you that given how restrictive CDBG is, it might be an activity that the city wants to undertake, but CDBG may not be the best match. Either way, but yeah, like.
I thought
if
you
we
said
do
public
want to-
services, the dollars we could do it under though.
Sorry?
I thought you said like the public services dollar.
Under public services, there is some housing services activity that we could do under CDBG with very specific restriction and ways to qualify people.
Okay.
One of them is what they call emergency assistance payment, which is a maximum of 3 months of rental assistance for a specific population, where with organizations that have the chops to be able to do the level of reporting we require them to do.
Yeah.
So when we say CDBG is very restrictive, it's not just on the regulation, it's also working within the confine of what they're allowing us.
Right. You said up to 3 months?
Yeah, maximum 3 months. Anything more, it's forbidden altogether.
Just 3 months, that could be an extended stay, for an example. That doesn't have to be, you probably wouldn't find an apartment for 3 months.
So when we do rental assistance, when we're talking about it,
Oh, you talking about rental
prevention
assistance, I'm sorry.
specific.
Yeah, okay.
So being, enabling people to stay
Somebody's
in
already
their
housed.
housing, essentially, which is
Homeless prevention.
where we found the best use of rental assistance in Evanston.
Would they also provide, well, I'll bring it up at it.
Right, there's still a lot to kind of figure out.
For sure, yeah.
But generally speaking, we're recommending that public services fund for CDBG, given where the cuts are and where the data is coming at, that
Yeah.
we try to go in that direction for that section of.
When do they think that the data is going to flush itself out? Is there a particular season or time or date that?
What data specifically? Because what I
Right.
found is like it's always
Or,
Catch up.
right.
You mean like, why are we working with data that's old? Is that the
No,
question?
when will the data be specific, so we know what the vision is, or what our vision will be
for the con plan.
for the comp plan? Thank you. Do we know if there's a particular goal date that we need to look forward to see?
This is a really interesting question in this moment in time, because our con plan, while it's 5 years, like 1 year and 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
it is happening at the same time as Envision Evanston, which is our 20-year plan, and our strategic housing plan, which is our 10-year plan. And because our federal dollars are really sort of small, and we just kind of want to fit them in where we can,
Mm-hmm.
we almost don't want to be too specific.
You wanna
Because
be
if something comes up through the strategic housing plan or Envision Evanston that, or, you know, the retail, Thrives Retail, or putting assets to work, not that, you know, we want to be as
Available?
flexible, available, and like responsive as we can be,
with the
knowing
data
that we
have.
don't have too much flexibility with these funds. For example, I know, it's kind of crazy. For example, one of the things that we heard in the community needs assessment that didn't make it into this particular slide deck is that there are certain portions of our city where residents said that lighting, street lighting, is
Mhm.
really important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Around those bus areas and high transportation areas.
Well, we don't know where, and we wouldn't necessarily know what we could do with CDBG funds, because it would have to be in one of our designated areas, and we would probably have to survey. I also think, which is challenging, we could get like a crime map and overlay it and make the argument, but that is a lot of a lot coming together for street lighting, when it could be that there are other public facilities that could better and more easily use those funds. So
Well,
it's that, yeah.
And the other part is, we've had that conversation with the Public Works team,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, we're aware, and we have other plans. There's, like, I think for them, it's like a $70 million project to upgrade, lighting. So when we're talking about, hey, we may have $200,000, it sounds like that's a need, we're not sure. They're like, thank you.
We got enough
But
money.
our 70 million will be having to meet the
Comply with all
CDBG requirements, so
requirements.
we're good.
Right.
It's not that, thank you, we don't want it, of course they do,
Mhm.
but it does
You
not
gotta
make sense, because it increases the cost so much and makes things so much more complicated, that it does not make sense to use those funds. and they have a much larger program to address that. That is exactly, because it came up in the survey quite a bit,
Right.
and we shared that feedback, they were well aware, and that's why it doesn't make it in our priorities, it's because it just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Well, the lighting, like you said, when we were doing participatory budgeting, that was one of the things
Mhm.
that a lot of the community kept bringing back up, that they wanted lighting, more lighting, that was new transportation. I don't know why people don't understand, we have our little T lights around here in Evanston, it's very hard to see. But that was an example of one of the issues that people would bring out outside of housing and security and employment and so forth, and I was just wondering if there was, but it makes sense, they would be able, of course, to have a much bigger bucket of funding to do something like that under construction.
Well, and with fewer restrictions,
Right.
and with, like,
And
with
different
services.
measurables,
Yeah.
A little bit of a puzzle game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know if that answered your question,
It did.
but these are the challenges. And I sort of flipped to this slide because this does outline our federal, goals, and the funding associated with those goals, and then the projects, that we're thinking of for this conference.
Yeah, and the biggest cut by far is under the creating visible communities. That's where we took the biggest cut, because we feel strongly that we want to keep public services and, the activities around affordable housing, if not expand them.
All right, moving right along. All right. Any thoughts about hopefully that will make when the comp plan is out in November, exciting reading. Hopefully that gives everyone a little preview, tell your friends, to make those sections
We may have
more
that
accessible.
conversation again.
Yeah, and you're welcome to come at the HTDC in November to hear more about the consolidated plan, since that's where we, discuss and vote on it.
Great.
The only thing I have for staff report is, in, the packet, we did include our, key performance indicators for city-funded programs. Just as a guide, for case management and safety net, the goal is to measure everyone by the same KPIs. For case management, that involves the number of service plans that are opened, the number of referrals that case managers make, and the number of services that case managers are able to enroll people in. For safety net services, given the diverse nature of the services funded, it's everything from food to childcare to, addiction prevention services or substance misuse services. The standard measures we use, also include the number of Evanston residents enrolled versus total population, but really it's the hours of service or the number of individual services. This is just a general overview of our year. This has been a slightly different year with the comp plan. It's also a renewal year for our case management and safety net service providers. So instead of having, we usually have our providers come in September and October to talk about their programs. That's because they filled out new applications. We won't have them do that. We also traditionally in November have a discussion about how we will allocate funds. That's when we're allocating new funds. Instead, this year, you guys have the reports in your packet to think about. Agency representatives will come in November, we'll meet in council chambers, and they can give a pitch, or they can address questions specifically at the will of this body. And then in December, our December meeting is when Social Services Committee is deciding allocation recommendations to send to. So I just wanted to provide that brief review. Any questions? So
Nice
just
to see it.
It's nice to
Right.
outline.
Know where we're going.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the reports are in the packet, and that's the reports that will be kind of discussed at the next meeting in November. So come with your questions.
And I will say they're very easy to review, like it's a
Yes.
really nice snapshot. We
Yes.
recognize that there is far more work there, but it is a nice summary so that we can compare apples to apples.
Apples and oranges to
And with that, a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you. Your final
My final adjournment, guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She does a great job. You can come back, girl.
I'll be back. I was,
Keep us in mind.
can I end this? Sarah, are you ending?
Thank you, everybody, for showing.
Thank you.